You want a run stand for your big block or small block Mopar, but you don't really have the budget for it. But you're like a typical Mopar guy and you have a bunch of car parts and junk cars and scrap cars and stuff like that. Or you have a buddy that's got all that stuff and access to it. Here's a cheap way to make a run stand. So this is basically the front clip to a 69 Dodge Charger I bought off a guy many years ago, back in the 90s. It had some rust issues in the roof. Actually, by today's standards, it would be a totally savable car, but unfortunately didn't have space for it, and it had the quarter panels and doors were full of mud, so the car got parted and scrapped out. But it kept the front clip, and I now use it as a run stand. So underneath, I basically made this guy like a little dolly out of 2x6s and 2x4s. Had some casters laying around, so I made that. I just bolted those to it. Put some notches in these boards here so that the K-member nestles into the dolly. Then I screwed some blocks right here to keep it from sliding off the back. Then on the rear, I have a cheap Harbor Freight furniture dolly and some 2x6s and 2x4 boards basically screwed together to hold the trans mount. So that's how it's suspended in the back. It's how it's suspended in the front. Typically when you have a run stand, especially if you're going automatic, on a Mopar, the starter bolts to the transmission. So you have to run typically like a 4-speed bell housing with a flywheel in there and a starter to start it. But doing it this way, I basically have my automatic hooked up. I just have an extra yoke laying around. I shoved that in there, put some grease on it, plugged it in, and I'm basically putting everything in place that would be in place once it's in the car, like the kickdown linkage, the trans lines. I'm gonna fill it full of transmission fluid. I'm gonna put it in park. And then, you know, just a cheap gauge set for your battery, oil pressure, temperature. Threw a tack on here so when we do a cam break-in, we could see where the RPMs are at. The last engine I ran on here was my mom's 72 Charger engine, and I ran a Mopar ignition system on it. Probably gonna do the same because I know all that works. Run a Mopar setup just to do the cam break-in. And yeah, so there you go. Battery, negative cable, the positive cable. I ended up using, it's basically like a factory style cables that go to the starter. So this will bolt down to the starter. This will bolt to the battery. And I ended up just, I tried hooking up these switches and a start button, and couldn't handle the amperage, so it started to smoke. So now I just started with a screwdriver right here. And if I remember right, one of these switches is my coil switch to turn it on, turn it off. So you can see I got the ballast resistor over there. So yeah, well anyway, that's how we have a cheap, budget-minded run stand, you know, just with basically junk parts laying around. So you need a K-member. You don't really need to put the trans mount on there, but I did. And front clip, basically, and you're good to go.